They didn't yell when they chose my sibling over me. They didn't argue or explain. They simply assumed I would accept it, like I always had. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm not the loud one. I never was. I'm the kind of person who listens more than she speaks, who notices details other people miss, who learns early how to survive without asking for much. Growing up, I learned one rule very fast. Love in my family was conditional. It was earned through mistakes forgiven too easily, as long as you weren't me. My younger brother, Ryan, was the center of everything. His needs came first. His failures were softened. His dreams were funded. I was the strong one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need help. At least that's what they told themselves. This story isn't about screaming matches or dramatic revenge. It's about something quieter, something more permanent. It's about the moment I realized no one was coming to save me, and how choosing myself changed everything. The day my parents chose my brother again wasn't special. No holiday, no argument, just a regular evening that finally showed me the truth I'd been avoiding. We were sitting in my parents' living room, the same one I grew up in, same couch, same family photos on the wall, all of them showing Ryan smiling, holding trophies, standing between Mom and Dad. My mother cleared her throat. "We've decided to help Ryan," she said. My stomach tightened. I already knew what was coming. "He's having a hard time," my father added. "We're covering his rent for a while, maybe longer." I waited. Not because I wanted the money, though I needed it too, but because part of me still hoped someone would look at me and ask, "How are you doing?" No one did. I had rehearsed my words for weeks. I'd finally worked up the courage to ask for help with my student loan, just a small amount, something to breathe. "I was actually hoping," I began. My mother smiled, but it was tired, dismissive. "Claire, not now. Ryan needs us more." Needs us more. That sentence landed heavier than anything else. Ryan was 30, unemployed again, living off chances he never seemed to run out of. And me? I worked full-time, paid my bills, never asked for help. I realized something in that moment. They didn't see my responsibility as effort. They saw it as proof I didn't deserve support. I nodded. Okay, that was it. No fight, no tears, but inside something shifted. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend. I didn't scream into the steering wheel. I felt calm, because for the first time, I understood the rules of my family clearly. They weren't going to change. They weren't suddenly going to choose me. So I made a quiet decision that night, sitting alone in my apartment. If my parents kept choosing my sibling, I would stop waiting and choose myself, and that choice would cost them more than they ever expected. After that night at my parents' house, something strange happened. Nothing changed, and that's what changed everything. My mother still texted me recipes I never asked for. My father still sent short messages about the weather or gas prices. Ryan still never reached out unless he needed something. They acted like the conversation never happened, like they hadn't chosen him again, like I hadn't quietly accepted that this was the last time I'd ever ask them for anything. For years, I believed distance had to be loud, a fight, a dramatic bye-bye, a slammed door, but I learned something important during that season of my life. You don't have to announce your absence for it to be felt. You just have to stop showing up the same way. I started with small things. I stopped volunteering information about my life. When my mom asked, "How's work?" I answered, "Busy." When my dad asked, "Everything okay?" I said, "Yeah." They didn't notice the difference. They never had. Ryan, on the other hand, noticed immediately. One afternoon, he called me out of the blue. "Hey," he said casually, "Mom said you've been quiet lately." I smiled to myself. Quiet. That's what they called peace when it didn't benefit them. "I've just been tired," I said. He didn't ask why. Instead, he went straight to the point. "Listen, I might need to crash at your place for a bit." There it was, the familiar weight, the old expectation. Before, I would have explained myself, apologized, found a way to make it work. This time, I didn't. I can't, I said, just 2 words. Silence stretched on the line. You can't? He repeated, confused. Why not? Because I don't owe you access to my life. Because I'm done cleaning up after choices I didn't make. Because I finally matter to myself. But I didn't say any of that. I just can't, I repeated calmly. He laughed awkwardly. Okay, wow. That laugh told me everything. He wasn't angry, he was shocked that the dependable sister had limits. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart racing. Saying no shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but it did. I realized how deeply trained I had been to be available, to be useful, to be easy. Letting go of that identity felt like learning how to breathe differently, uncomfortable, necessary. I poured myself into work, not because I was chasing money, but because work didn't ask me to shrink. I stayed late, took on responsibility, learned how decisions were made behind closed doors. People noticed, not because I demanded attention, but because I was consistent. One evening, my manager stopped by my desk. "You ever think about leading a project?" she asked. No one in my family had ever asked me that. "Yeah, I have," I said. And for the first time, I believed it. Meanwhile, my parents kept leaning on the version of me that no longer existed. My mom called one Sunday. "Ryan's having a hard week. Can you check on him?" I paused. "I think you should," I replied. She sounded surprised. "Well, you're just so good at calming him down." I swallowed. That was never a compliment. It was a responsibility disguised as praise. "I'm working on myself right now. I don't have the space." There it was again, that quiet boundary. She didn't argue, but she didn't understand either. And that was okay. What they didn't know was that while I was quiet, I was becoming someone else. Someone who didn't need permission. Someone who didn't wait for approval. Someone who was building a life that didn't revolve around being chosen. I wasn't running away. I was stepping forward. And the more I did, the clearer it became. The distance they ignored was going to cost them later. Because when you teach someone they're on their own long enough, eventually they believe you. The strange thing about stepping back from people who took you for granted is that they don't notice right away. At first, they assume you're busy. Then they assume you're moody. Finally, they assume you'll come back to normal. My parents stayed in that final stage for a long time. They kept inviting me to family dinners like nothing had changed. My mother still sent group texts. My father still asked surface-level questions that required no real answers. And I kept showing up, but differently. I listened more than I spoke. I left early. I stopped filling silences. That was new. Before, silence had made me uncomfortable. I'd rush to smooth it out, explain myself, make things easy for everyone else. Now I let it sit, and slowly the room felt heavier. Ryan noticed before anyone else. He always did, because my presence had always made his life easier. One night at dinner, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. "You've been kind of distant lately. Everything okay?" The table went quiet. My parents looked at me, waiting for the familiar reassurance. I set my fork down calmly. "I'm fine," I said. "That's it?" Ryan asked. "Are you not mad or anything?" I met his eyes. "No," I said honestly. "I'm just focused on my own life." He laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Must be nice." It was, but not in the way he meant. That night, my mom cornered me in the kitchen while Ryan stepped outside to take a call. "You didn't have to sound so cold," she whispered. I dried my hands on a towel. I wasn't cold. "You used to be more open," she said. I nodded. "I used to be more available." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't evil, she was just comfortable. Comfortable letting one child carry more weight than the other. Comfortable believing strength meant sacrifice. Comfortable because I never forced her to confront it. "I'm tired," I said softly. She didn't push. She never pushed when it came to me. At work, things were different. People asked my opinion and waited for the answer. They noticed when I stayed late. They trusted me with responsibility instead of assuming I'd handle it for free. One Friday afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk. "We're restructuring. I want you leading the new client rollout." My chest tightened. That wasn't a small assignment. "You're sure?" I asked. She smiled. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't." I walked out of her office with something unfamiliar settling into my bones. Confidence. Not borrowed, not given, earned. Ryan called me 2 days later. "I need a favor," he said, skipping the greeting. I waited. "Mom says you might help with the paperwork," he added. I leaned back on my couch. "No," I said. Just like that. He scoffed. "Seriously? What's gotten into you?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm not—" Claire didn't announce her absence. She simply stopped compensating. From the outside, nothing looked broken at first. The family routine continued the way it always had. Sunday dinners, group messages, the occasional "how are you?" that required no real answer. But something essential was missing. Claire had been the quiet glue. She was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who smoothed arguments before they turned sharp, the one who noticed bills unpaid, tension rising, emotions about to spill. Without her, small cracks began to show. Ryan missed a deadline he assumed Claire would remind him about. Their mother forgot to mail an important document. Their father miscommunicated with a lender because no one followed up. These weren't disasters yet. They were inconveniences, and inconveniences made Ryan irritated. Ryan felt it first. He didn't understand what had changed, only that things felt harder. When he called their parents to complain about stress, their mother was distracted. When he asked his father for advice, the answers were shorter, less patient. Without Claire absorbing the emotional overflow, everything landed heavier. One night, Ryan threw his keys onto the counter and snapped. "Why does everything feel off lately?" Their mother sighed. "We're all just tired." But Ryan knew better. He knew exactly who wasn't there doing the work anymore. Claire, meanwhile, was building a life that didn't require explaining. At work, her name started appearing in meetings she used to sit silently through. People asked for her input and actually waited. Her confidence didn't arrive all at once. It showed up quietly, through competence, reliability, and the refusal to shrink. She stopped apologizing before speaking. She stopped offering help unless asked. And when asked, she considered whether she wanted to say yes. That alone changed everything. Her evenings were calmer now. No emergency calls, no emotional cleanup, no fixing problems she hadn't caused. For the first time in her adult life, her energy belonged to her. At a family dinner 2 months later, the tension finally surfaced. Ryan was pacing, irritated. Their mother kept glancing at Claire. Their father stared at his plate. "You're really busy these days," Ryan said, not hiding the accusation. Claire looked up calmly. "Yes." "That's it?" he pressed. She shrugged. "That's it." Her mother jumped in. "We just don't see you as much." Claire nodded again. "That happens when you build your own life." Ryan laughed bitterly. "Must be nice to check out when things get hard." Claire met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "I didn't check out. I stepped back." "Same thing," he snapped. "No," she replied. "It only feels the same to people who depended on me not having boundaries." The table went silent. Their father finally looked up. "That's not fair," he said. Claire didn't argue. She didn't need to. The truth didn't require defending anymore. Later that night, their mother followed Claire to the door. "You don't have to push us away," she said softly. Claire paused. "I'm not pushing, I'm standing." Her mother didn't know how to respond to that. Driving home, Claire felt something unfamiliar: relief. The old version of her would have replayed the conversation all night, wondering if she'd been too harsh, too distant, too cold. This version didn't. She understood something now that had taken years to learn. If someone only feels close to you when you're overgiving, they don't actually miss you, they miss the access. And she was done providing unlimited access. Back at her apartment, Claire poured a glass of water and stood by the window watching the city lights flicker on. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even sad. She was focused. Because stepping back had revealed something important. Her family didn't fall apart without her. They just became honest. And that honesty was going to force a reckoning they weren't ready for. Claire didn't notice the panic at first. It crept in quietly, the same way favoritism always had. Soft words, careful questions, concern dressed up as love. It started with her mother calling more often, not to ask how Claire was doing, not to listen, but to check. "Are you coming by this weekend? You didn't answer my message earlier. You seem busy lately. Everything okay?" The question sounded harmless, but Claire felt the tension underneath them. Her absence had created space, and in that space, uncertainty was growing. Her parents had relied on predictability, and Claire was no longer predictable. Ryan, on the other hand, was unraveling faster. Without Claire quietly fixing details, things slipped through his fingers. Deadlines passed, forms were incomplete, he forgot meetings. He blamed stress, bad luck, anyone who wasn't himself. And slowly his parents stopped smoothing things out for him the way they used to. Not because they'd changed, but because they were tired. And tired people start noticing where effort goes. One evening, Ryan showed up at their parents' house unannounced. "I can't do everything myself," he snapped, pacing the living room. "Claire used to help." Their mother froze. Their father sighed. "Claire has her own life now," he said. Ryan stopped pacing. Since when? That question hung in the air. Since always. They just never allowed it. Claire felt the shift at work, too, but in a different way. Her independence wasn't just emotional anymore. It was structural. She'd taken on leadership responsibilities. She had savings now, options, a voice. People trusted her judgment, and when someone tried to overstep, she shut it down calmly, without apology. That confidence changed how people treated her. It also changed how her family couldn't treat her anymore. At the next family gathering, the energy was off from the moment Claire arrived. Her mother hovered. Her father watched closely. Ryan barely spoke to her. Claire sat comfortably, no longer trying to manage the mood. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't perform. She let everyone sit with their discomfort. Halfway through dinner, her father cleared his throat. "We've been thinking, maybe it's time we start spending more time together again." Claire looked up. "We are spending time together." He hesitated. "I mean, like before." Before, when she gave more than she received, when she carried emotional weight that wasn't hers, when she was dependable because she had no choice. "I don't want before," Claire said evenly. "I want now." Ryan scoffed. "So you're just done with us?" Claire turned toward him slowly. "No," she said, "I'm done disappearing." That was the moment fear flickered across their faces, because they understood something then, maybe not fully, but enough to feel it. They no longer controlled the version of Claire they'd built their family around. Later that night, her mother cornered her again. "You've changed," she said softly. "You're harder to reach." Claire nodded. "That's intentional." Her mother's eyes filled slightly. "We didn't mean to hurt you." Claire believed her. That didn't change anything. "I know, but impact matters more than intention." Her mother didn't have an answer for that. Driving home, Claire felt something she hadn't expected. Not victory, not anger, clarity.
She saw her family clearly now, not as villains, but as people who had grown comfortable benefiting from imbalance. And people like that don't give up control easily. They push, they test, they guilt. Claire was ready, because she wasn't trying to punish them, she was protecting herself. And the more stable her life became, the more unstable their old dynamic felt. A week later, her father called. "We need to talk," he said. Something about his tone was different, not commanding, not casual, uncertain. Claire smiled faintly as she ended the call. They were finally realizing it. The version of her they depended on was gone, and what came next would decide everything.
The shift wasn't sudden. It never is. It began with small attempts to regain control, subtle reminders, casual expectations, the kind that had always worked on Claire before. Her mother started calling late at night. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she'd say. But the conversations weren't about Claire. They circled back to Ryan's stress, Ryan's setbacks, Ryan's needs. Claire listened once, twice, then she stopped answering after 9 p.m. Her father started showing up unannounced. Not aggressively, not loudly, just standing at her door with concern written across his face. "We were in the neighborhood," he'd say. They never were. Claire didn't invite him in. That boundary, simple, physical, sent a message louder than words ever could. Ryan was the one who reacted badly. He always had. When access was taken away, he panicked. He started calling Claire's coworkers under the excuse of checking in. He asked mutual relatives questions that weren't their business. He complained openly about her attitude and distance. For the first time in his life, his usual charm didn't land. People noticed. They always do when someone pushes too hard. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening. Ryan showed up at Claire's apartment without warning, knocking sharply. She opened the door and didn't step aside. "What do you want?" she asked calmly. He stared at her like he didn't recognize her. "You really think you can just walk away from us?" he demanded. Claire crossed her arms. "I didn't walk away, I stepped back." "You think you're better than us now?" he snapped. "No," she replied. "I just stopped playing my role." His jaw tightened. "You're tearing this family apart." Claire held his gaze. "No," she said. "I stopped holding it together alone." That stopped him, because it was true. Inside, he paced while she stood near the doorway, ready to end the conversation at any moment. "You don't get it," he said. "Mom and Dad need you." Claire shook her head. "They want me. There's a difference." He scoffed. "You're being cold." "I'm being honest." "And what happens when they get sick, when they need help?" he challenged. Claire's voice didn't waver. "We'll talk then, but not like this. Not with guilt, not with control." Ryan laughed sharply. "You used to care." "I still do, I just don't disappear anymore to prove it." He left angry, and that was the moment Claire knew there was no going back. Her parents felt the rupture immediately. They tried one last strategy: fear. Her father called 2 days later. "You're isolating yourself," he warned. "That's dangerous." Claire closed her eyes briefly. "I'm not isolated, I'm independent." "You're pushing people away," he insisted. "No," I replied. "I'm letting the right distance exist." There was a long pause. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Claire smiled. "For the first time in my life, I'm not." The fallout wasn't loud, it was slow. Invitations stopped, messages shortened, the warmth thinned. And Claire let it, because peace that requires you to perform isn't peace at all. Something else happened during that time. Without the constant emotional drain, Claire flourished. She slept better, thought clearer, planned longer. She took a leap she would have never taken before.
a new opportunity, a bold move, a step that terrified and excited her, and she took it without asking anyone's permission. Weeks later, her mother finally said what had been hanging in the air. "We don't know where we fit in your life anymore," she admitted. Claire considered that carefully. "You fit, just not at the center." Her mother looked stunned. For decades, Claire had lived on the edges of everyone else's priorities. Now she was choosing herself as the center, and they didn't know how to handle it. That night, alone in her apartment, Claire felt the weight of it all. The grief, the freedom, the finality. Choosing yourself costs something, but staying invisible costs more, and Claire was done paying that price.
The meeting happened on a Sunday afternoon. That alone told Claire everything she needed to know. Sundays had always belonged to the family. They were sacred in her parents' house. Meals that stretched too long, conversations that never went anywhere, obligations disguised as tradition. When her father asked her to come over just to talk, Claire knew it wasn't just a talk. It was an attempt to pull her back into place. She arrived on time, calm, prepared. Her mother had already set out coffee and pastries, the way she did when something uncomfortable was coming. Ryan was there too, sitting on the far end of the couch, arms crossed. Claire took a seat across from them. No one spoke for a moment. Then her mother sighed. "We're worried about you," she said. Claire waited. "You seem distant," her father added, "disconnected from the family." Ryan scoffed quietly, more like checked out. Claire didn't react. She'd learned that silence had power when you stopped using it to disappear. "I'm not disconnected," Claire said. "I'm just not overextending anymore." Her mother's brow furrowed. That sounds selfish. There it was, the word they always reached for when she stopped giving. Claire inhaled slowly. "Selfish would be expecting me to carry what isn't mine," she said. "I'm just setting limits." Ryan leaned forward. "Limits? You're acting like we're strangers." "No, I'm acting like an adult with her own life." Her father shifted in his seat. "We raised you to care about family." "You raised me to sacrifice," Claire said quietly. "There's a difference." The room went still. Her mother's eyes glistened. "We did the best we could." Claire believed that too, but belief didn't erase patterns. "I know you did, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." Ryan finally snapped. "So what? You want an apology? You want us to beg?" Claire looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't angry at her. He was afraid. Afraid of being responsible without a safety net. Afraid of losing the version of Claire that made his life easier. "I don't want anything from you," Claire said. "That's the point." That was the moment everything shifted. They expected demands, ultimatums, conditions. They didn't know how to handle her wanting nothing. Her mother wiped her eyes. "We just don't recognize you anymore." Claire nodded. "That's because you never really knew me. You knew the role I played." Her father leaned back, exhaling heavily. "So what happens now?" he asked. Claire didn't rush to answer. This wasn't a confrontation, it was a boundary setting. "We move forward, but differently. I don't manage emotions that aren't mine. I don't clean up messes I didn't make, and I don't accept guilt as a form of love." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," Claire replied. "It's just uncomfortable." The drive home felt lighter than Claire expected. She hadn't won anything. She hadn't lost anything either. She had simply told the truth, and the truth had rearranged the room. In the weeks that followed, the guilt came in waves. Her mother sent long messages about family values. Her father reminded her of everything they'd done. Ryan alternated between silence and sarcasm. Claire didn't argue. She didn't justify. She responded when she wanted. She disengaged when she needed. And slowly, the guilt stopped working, because guilt only works on people who believe they owe something. Claire no longer did. At work, she was thriving. A new project, more responsibility, more trust. Her confidence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It showed up in decisions, in boundaries, in the way she stopped shrinking to make room for others. One evening, as she locked up her apartment, Claire caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same, but she wasn't. She wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't hoping they'd change. She was moving forward regardless. Her parents felt it. They felt it in her shorter visits, her calm refusals, her refusal to engage in emotional bargaining. And that scared them, because when guilt fails, people reach for control, and that was coming next. The first real consequence didn't look dramatic. There was no shouting, no scandal, no public collapse. It showed up as silence. Ryan stopped calling, not because he had found peace, but because he had run out of leverage. Every attempt to pull Claire back had failed, and without her constant support, he was forced to face the weight of his own choices. That weight was heavier than he expected. Their parents noticed the change in him quickly. Ryan became irritable, impatient. He missed appointments. He snapped at small inconveniences. Without Claire smoothing his edges, his flaws were exposed, first to them, then to others. Bills piled up. Deadlines passed. Plans fell apart. The excuses that once worked no longer did, not because their parents had grown wiser, but because they were exhausted. They were tired of fixing problems that never ended, and for the first time, they wondered why. Claire watched all of this from a distance. She didn't celebrate it. She didn't gloat. She simply didn't intervene. That was the hardest part, because for years she had been trained to step in the moment things wobbled, to stabilize, to rescue. Now she let them wobble, and wobble turned into collapse. Ryan lost an opportunity he'd been counting on. Nothing glamorous, nothing headline-worthy, just a chance that slipped away because he didn't follow through. He blamed bad timing, then he blamed stress, then he blamed Claire. She changed, he told their parents. She used to help. Their mother felt the sting of that, because it was true. Claire had helped. Too much. One evening, their father sat alone in the living room, staring at nothing. The realization came quietly. Claire had never been cold. She had been compensating, and without her, the imbalance was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Claire's life was expanding in ways that surprised even her. She had taken on a new role at work, one that required trust, authority, and decisiveness. She was no longer waiting for instructions. She was giving them. Colleagues respected her. Her voice carried weight, not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't doubt herself anymore. That confidence bled into everything. Her posture changed. Her tone shifted. Her time became valuable. Her mother called one evening after weeks of silence. "I don't know how to help him anymore," she admitted. Claire listened. That alone was new. "You don't have to," Claire said gently. "But he's your brother," her mother whispered. Nodded. "And I'm his sister, not his safety net." The line was quiet. Her mother had no response. That was when it hit Claire fully. She wasn't being punished with distance. She was being revealed. Revealed as someone who had been holding more than her share all along. And once she stopped, the truth rushed in. The family started fracturing, not because Claire left, but because the structure had always depended on her silence. Without it, everything tilted. And tilt becomes fall. One night, Claire sat alone on her balcony, city lights flickering below. She felt sadness, grief, but no regret, because the woman she was becoming would never survive inside the old version of her family. And she finally accepted something that had haunted her for years. You can love people deeply
and still choose not to save them. That isn't cruelty, it's clarity.
The invitation arrived in the mail. That alone unsettled Claire. Her parents hadn't mailed her anything in years. Everything had been texts, quick calls, assumptions that she would show up when expected. But this was different. Cream-colored envelope, her name written carefully in her mother's handwriting. Family dinner. Important. No explanation, no warmth, just expectation. Claire stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. She already knew what it meant. This wasn't reconciliation. It was a final attempt to reset the balance. The night of the dinner, Claire arrived on time, but not early. That mattered. In the past, she would have shown up first, helped in the kitchen, asked what was needed. Now, she walked in when she was ready. Ryan was already there. He looked thinner, tired, less sure of himself. Their parents greeted her with forced brightness. Too bright, too careful. They sat down to eat, and for a while, no one mentioned the tension hanging in the air. They talked about weather, neighbors, distant relatives. Avoidance dressed as politeness. Finally, her father set his fork down. "We've been thinking a lot," he said. Claire waited. "We want to move forward as a family," her mother added quickly. "All of us, together." Claire nodded. "What does that mean?" They exchanged a glance. Ryan spoke first. "I need help," he said bluntly. There it was. No apology, no reflection, just need. Claire looked at him calmly. "With what?" she asked. "Everything," he said. "I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this alone." Her mother reached for Claire's hand. "You've always been good at this," she said softly, "at keeping things steady." Claire gently pulled her hand back. "That's not a role. That's a burden." The temperature in the room changed. Her father's voice hardened slightly. "We're asking you to step up." Claire met his eyes. "I already have, just not for you." Silence followed. Then guilt arrived, exactly as she knew it would. Her mother's eyes filled. "We're getting older," she whispered. "We won't always be here." Fear, legacy, obligation, the last cards they had left. Claire felt the weight of it press against her chest, and for a moment, just a moment, she almost folded, not because she doubted herself, but because she loved them. Then she remembered every quiet dismissal, every time she was told to wait, every moment she was strong so others could stay comfortable. She exhaled slowly. "I love you, but I won't disappear again." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "So you're just abandoning us?" Claire shook her head. "No, I'm refusing to abandon myself." Her father stood. "This isn't how family works," he said sharply. Claire stood too. "This is how survival works." She left before dessert, before tears could turn into weapons, before doubt could take root. Outside, the air felt lighter. Painful, but clean. That night, Claire cried, not because she was weak, but because she had finally chosen truth over comfort. In the days that followed, the backlash came. Cold messages, sharp silences, stories told without her version. She let them, because she was done explaining. Something unexpected happened next. Without the constant emotional tug-of-war, Claire felt steady, grounded. She made a decision she had been postponing for years, a move, a shift, a future that didn't include being the family's solution, and she took it without asking anyone's permission. Her parents realized too late. Ryan felt it immediately. The role they'd depended on was gone for good, and this time Claire wasn't stepping back. She was stepping forward.
I always thought revenge would feel loud. Explosions, screaming, some dramatic moment where everyone finally understood what they'd done to me. But the truth came out quietly, and that scared them more than yelling ever could.
By the time Chapter 9 began, my family had already noticed something was wrong. They just didn't know how bad it was yet. I hadn't called in weeks. I hadn't asked for help. I hadn't argued back. To them, that silence felt like control. To me, it felt like freedom. It started with my mother. She called me one afternoon, her voice sugary in that fake way she used when she wanted something. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, "your father and I were talking about you." I almost laughed. They never talked about me unless they needed a scapegoat. "What about me?" I asked. There was a pause. Papers shuffled. I could hear my dad in the background whispering. "Well," she said carefully, "we heard you've been doing well." Doing well. Those two words hit harder than any insult they'd ever thrown at me, because they weren't proud, they were nervous. "I'm fine," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "You didn't tell us you'd changed jobs." I didn't change jobs. I built something. Her breath caught. I could picture her face tightening, the way it always did when she realized she wasn't in control of the story. "That's good," she said. "We just wish you'd keep us informed." That was rich. They'd taken my college fund without telling me. They'd signed loans in my name. They'd handed opportunities to my sibling and called it fair. And now they wanted updates. "I'm busy. I'll call another time." I hung up before she could argue. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. A week later, my sibling reached out. That never happened unless something was wrong. "Hey," they texted. "Mom's stressed. You should talk to her." I stared at the message for a long time. This was the same sibling who got the new car while I walked, the same sibling who laughed when I slept on a friend's couch, the same sibling who told me I was too sensitive every time I was hurt. I typed back, "Why?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Things are complicated right now." I smiled. "Good. Not my problem," I wrote. That was it. No insults, no explanations, just truth. What my family didn't know, what they couldn't see from the outside, was that everything they'd taken from me had taught me something. When you grow up with nothing, you learn how to watch. When you're ignored, you learn how to listen. When you're underestimated, you learn how to prepare. I'd kept records, emails, documents, messages they assumed I'd deleted, not because I planned revenge back then, but because something in me knew one day I'd need the truth, and that day was getting close. The family dinner. They invited me to dinner. That alone told me how desperate they were. My mother's house smelled the same as always, overcooked food and control. The walls still held photos of my siblings' accomplishments. Mine were missing, like I never existed. We sat at the table. My father cleared his throat. "We're worried about you." I raised an eyebrow. "You never were before." My sibling shifted uncomfortably. Mom sighed. "We just don't understand why you've pulled away." I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said calmly, "you don't understand why I'm not begging anymore." Silence. Real silence this time. I continued. "You took everything from me. My savings, my support, my place in this family, and you thought I'd stay quiet forever." My dad frowned. "That's not how it happened." I smiled again. "That's how it was recorded." My mother went pale. The moment they realized. I didn't slam papers on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "If you ever try to rewrite my story again, I'll tell it for you." My sibling laughed nervously. "You're being dramatic." I turned to them. "You benefited from everything they took from me, and you never once said no." Their smile vanished. My father stood up. "This conversation is over." "No," I said softly. "It's finally starting." That's when I saw it. Fear. Not anger, not superiority. Fear. Because they knew I wasn't asking for permission anymore. The aftermath. They didn't call for days after that, then weeks. Friends started asking me questions. Relatives started acting awkward. Someone had talked, and for once, it wasn't me. The truth had slipped sideways, the way it always does. and my family realized something they never expected. I wasn't trying to come back. I was moving forward. Without them. I used to think being chosen meant being loved. Now I knew better. Being chosen meant being used, and for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself.
The truth didn't explode. It didn't trend overnight. It didn't come with applause or dramatic music. It arrived slowly, like a crack in a wall no one bothered to fix, and then the whole thing collapsed. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call extended family. I didn't warn anyone. I simply stopped protecting them. That was it. When people asked why I wasn't around anymore, I didn't lie. When coworkers asked about my family, I didn't soften it. When a cousin messaged me privately, I told the truth, plain, calm, unedited. And the truth has a way of traveling on its own. It always does. Soon, people started asking them questions. Why did you take money meant for her? Why did she leave so suddenly? Why does every story paint her as difficult, but none explain what she endured? They weren't ready for that. They'd spent years controlling the narrative. They never prepared for losing it. My father called first, not yelling, not blaming, quiet. That scared me more than anything else. "You've made things hard for us," he said. I closed my eyes. "For who?" I asked. "For the family." I laughed softly. "You mean for you?" Silence. "You didn't have to tell people," he said. I didn't. I just stopped lying. That's when his voice changed. "You think you're better than us now?" I thought about the years I went without help, the nights I cried alone, the way they told me I was dramatic for hurting. "No," I said. "I think I'm free." He hung up. They showed up unannounced, standing on my doorstep like they belonged there. "I don't understand why you're doing this," they said. I didn't invite them in. "You understood when you benefited," I replied. "That's not fair." "Neither was my life," I said calmly. Their eyes filled with frustration. "You're ruining everything." I nodded. Only the parts built on my silence. They left angry, but not innocent. They lost credibility. People stopped taking their stories at face value. Family gatherings got quiet. Invitations stopped coming. They weren't villains. They were worse. They were exposed. And exposure doesn't scream, it isolates. I kept my name. I kept my peace. I kept my future. I built a life where I didn't have to beg to be valued, where love didn't come with conditions, where silence wasn't survival, it was choice. I didn't win by watching them fall. I won by walking away whole. Here's what no one tells you about revenge. The best kind doesn't look like punishment. It looks like healing. It looks like boundaries. It looks like saying no and meaning it. It looks like choosing yourself even when they call you selfish for it. My parents chose my sibling again, so I chose myself, and I never looked back.